Hi there, today I'm starting the second interior design and watercolor piece and I am super excited. As always, I get the table ready first and bring out the cotton fabric that I plan to use. Just as last time, I am using these interior object patterns from the interior design embroidery course on Charleston Allen Academy for inspiration of how to structure and compose my design. Now, I quickly realized that it felt too risky to begin sketching right on the fabric, so I decided to bring out a sheet of paper and sketch just loosely my ideas there first. I still use the same Muji ink pen that I will use for the fabric as well. It's my favorite pen as I find it very light in my hand and it's just perfect that it doesn't smear out when exposed to water. With the sketch done, I use it as my reference for sketching on the fabric. Quite early on though, I felt that I had started it wrong, so I just flipped the fabric and started again. I like to still keep a loose hand when sketching on the fabric as well, which is why you see me holding quite high on the pen. Now it's time to start painting. I first take out my Van Gogh pocket-sized color set, add the hoop to the fabric and stretch it out so that it makes a stable base for the painting process. I start with a wall, and as it's a bigger area to fill, I use a wetter brush to let the paint bleed easier and more natural. And just as with the last scene, I just felt this urge to use light pink again, so why not? I paint over some of the plants where I know that I will fill out the lines with stitches anyway. Thanks to the properties of watercolor, we can also make really cool light bulbs that hang from the ceiling. By adding extra water, I let the yellow light bleed into the pink wall to represent the visual of how the light travels. Hence, the yellow merges with the pink and it's the strongest closest to the light source, of course, whereafter it gets weaker and weaker, just as the light would in real life as well. And then it's time for some greenery. Last but not least, the wall hanging. I fill it out because I haven't fully decided yet what type of wall hanging I feel like doing, so that is to be decided. For this piece, I will mostly use DMC embroidery floss, and instead of only stitching the contours, I will also add some split and satin stitches, for example, inside most of the leaves. And for this bigger plant, I also use two different gradients of green to enhance a natural sense or a natural variation. Filling out some details on the pot. I also fill out the bench, as well as the small stool that you see to the left. For the little lamp base, I wanted to use some gold, and both Charles and I are in love with this Au Ver à Soie golden floss because they don't break as easily as other glittery floss can do, which is what makes them just so awesome. Now, it began to get a bit late, which means too dark outside to be able to film properly, so I shifted over to the nighttime part of the studio. We had to buy these big lights already years ago because the light is rarely good enough on rainy days either, so it was simply too unpredictable to rely on daylight when we lived in Paris and of course here in Sweden as well. I will put the link to those lights below in case you are curious to check them out. I started by adding some of the smaller items on the bench, which are a couple of books and a tiny plant as well. You can never have too many plants. This is really a plant scenery. And then moving on to the floor. Taking a single strand so that once again I can do some nice wooden floors. For the last design I stitched relatively wide planks for the wooden floors, hence to change it up I decided to make thinner planks for this one so that I can see which one I prefer the best. I think this is a very good tip when you create interior design sceneries, where you don't switch out everything at once, but rather reuse elements you love and make slight alterations. It's how you can clearly develop your style and you get some concrete practice and visualization at the same time. For the flowers, I use the traditional French knots, which also add some nice texture to the otherwise quite smooth piece. For all of the knots on this piece, I use 2 strands and 2 turns. We have finally arrived to the wall hanging. I decided to go for a weave, and as a result I had to start by turning the dedicated area into a weave. I did that by doing very long straight stitches, the same length as the wall hanging itself. Thereafter, I only use full stranded floss, so that means 6 strands for the actual weave. A tip is to turn your needle around and use the needle eye to avoid stitching through the quite fragile single-stranded strings. And to weave, you simply alternate above and below every other string before you carefully pull through. To secure each row, I end with a stitch at the end. Oh, and another thing, to ensure a smooth and nice looking weave, be sure to push up each row against the previous one to avoid creating empty spaces or just making the weave all twisted. I really noticed a difference when I made sure to do this after each row instead of doing a few and then push them all up. In case you wonder why I still leave some spaces empty anyway, it's because I wanted to create this kind of abstract design where the inspiration came from thinking about mountaintops. Now, don't ask me how I came up with that. To go with the pink wall, I also added some variated pink floss in the middle of this kind of mountainish shape. At the end, I just did some vertical straight stitches with the same floss as I used for the strings to just give a nice finish. I really love this design. Thank you so much for following along, and don't miss to check out charlesandellenacademy.com to learn more about the courses we have in watercolor embroidery and interior design embroidery. I will put the links to that below as well. See ya!